Welcome back to Theology for the Unwanted. I'm your host, Dan Tilson, and directly across from me, live from Northern Virginia, I have my vocals coach, John Byram. What's up, man?
I'm a vocal coach. Now we're going to add that to the LinkedIn profile.
Hey, you were just encouraging me to be a little bit more bold, so here we are.
Yeah, just a little advice I got when I had my own TV show for a bit was if...
That's a flex.
Is that a flex?
It is. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay. I think that's like the first time I've ever mentioned it myself without you bringing it up to someone else first. But yeah, if you feel like you are being over the top and crazy, it comes across normal on audio and TV. So
well, we're gonna test it out. I'm gonna be more animated than usual. I'm gonna get my head out of the book while we're chatting. So we'll see. So if you're new to this podcast, we're chatting with Catholics who feel unwanted. We're also talking to Catholics who have left the church and just never found like their place in the pew really mattered. John, I don't know if you know this. Obviously, you've seen a lot of the messages that are in our inboxes on Instagram and TikTok, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Every day, I have to go into the hidden section on Instagram, and I have to unhide messages, not because something insulting's in there, but because for whatever reason, the really important stuff automatically gets filtered out.
Yeah, it's almost like Meta's trying to appease. You know what? We're not going to go there. Nope. But yes, the algorithm does not decipher intent very well.
Yeah.
And that's why AI is not a threat.
It will be like the most innocuous, the most prayerful, kind message ever. And I'll be like, well, why was this blocked? And I'll be like, somewhere in there they said, I might be gay.
I think one of my favorite ones is like when you're trying to disseminate what the person's tone is.
Yeah.
When they leave that comment.
It's not easy.
And I love it. Someone left the Lord's Prayer on one of the comments on Instagram. And when I read it in a very passive aggressive tone. And I was like, I don't like the way they used that.
Yeah.
But I had to assume they were coming from a place of good intention. But I just read it and I was like, I don't think they meant it that way.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It did feel very, very pointed. I don't know what it is about them quoting like Mother Mary the Immaculate, but I was like, they didn't mean it in a nice way, but I still put a heart next to it because how could we turn down prayers to Mary?
Right. I'm gonna put a heart and an asterisk next to it and be like, you know what? You should probably think about this and take that one to confession a little bit and maybe determine whether or not you actually meant that or not.
Ditto.
So.
Well, we've talked a lot about this tension that exists between canon lawyers in the Catholic Church. So, first off, it's a very important discipline. So nothing we say tonight suggests that we're going to try and throw that away. But if you are in a situation where you feel like you don't belong in the pews, it is often because your life is in a situation where it just doesn't totally gel with Catholic discipline. On the other hand, this podcast always talks from the perspective of moral theology. So we're very comfortable here. John, you and I talk about things that are not black and white all the time.
Nope.
And I think that's why it relates so well to the audience. Mm-hmm. But there is a priest, Father Ginter Dzierzon, of the Faculty of Canon Law at a very prestigious university in Poland, the Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński School of Law. We're going to be talking about his perspective because as a canon lawyer, he too has joined the chorus of professors saying, hey, 300 years ago, lawyers in the church and the theologians, they started drifting apart. They started doing their own training separately. And it's really making it difficult for the church to communicate what it means to the modern world. And so we're going to walk through that from his perspective a little bit. Since we're talking about the law tonight from a legal perspective instead of the theology perspective so much, I'm curious, John, were you ever interested in becoming a cop?
Never.
Okay.
Never wanted to be a cop.
Let's imagine, instead of asking like, what kind of cop would you be? I'm just going to assign you to traffic land in Northern Virginia.
Oh, no.
I'm curious, if I got pulled over by you.
What county am I in?
This one.
Okay.
So if I got pulled over, and to the listeners at home, whatever one you're in, that's the county we're talking about, okay?
If we're talking about the literal county, I'm doing nothing.
Yeah. What kind of cop would you be? Like, you're coming up, you're asking for my registration and my driver's license, and are you looking for a reason to nail me, or are you just trying to, meet your quota?
I mean, obviously, I like to think that the purpose of the police is to protect and serve. So obviously, you want to protect the community you are working in and living in. And I guess maybe speaking from a place of never having been a cop, and I would imagine if we have any cop listeners, they may push back a little bit at this. I would like to err on the side of education,
Okay.
right? Like have that conversation with the person like, hey, you're doing 9 over the speed limit. Why?
Why?
Just simple why. And see what they say. And, I know, a seasoned cop would be like, oh, they're just going to lie to you anyway. Well, I mean, society not truthful. What? I would like to think that in a good amount of cases, people would either just be like, hey, look, made a mistake, got caught up in the music. I was having a conversation on the phone, just wasn't paying attention, and I ended up going 7, 8, 9, 10 miles an hour over.
Yeah.
And for me, I would be like, okay, cool. Let me go run your stuff real quick. And if they don't have a history of it, I'm not gonna ding them.
Yeah.
Right. Unless it's like something, and this is where we were talking about this before, and this is where my libertarianism comes in a little bit. If it's not directly affecting somebody else, at the end of the day, I just really don't care. Like if you want to drive in your car, you're the only car on the road, and you want to go 120 miles an hour and put yourself in danger, go for it. But if there's other people on the road, now you're putting other people in danger. That's a problem.
Okay, so is there one particular sin or traffic violation that you would just nail people on if you had to meet your quota and you're like, you know what, I'm not pulling out my speedometer. I'm looking for people who aren't using their turn signal.
I'm not going for a turn signal because I'd be pulling over every single Maryland plate. No, I would sit at an intersection and pull over everyone who runs a red light, because it feels like every single signal change at an intersection, there's a minimum of 3 cars. And folks, I'm not talking about, oh, the light turned yellow and like 2 more cars can get through before like it turns red or whatever, or it turns red when you're in the middle of the intersection. I'm talking about the other direction of traffic has the right of way, has a green light or a green arrow, and 3 cars still go through the intersection. That is what I'm seeing on a daily basis here.
You're turning just a little bit red. It makes me think that you have, I don't know, were you ever attacked by someone over this?
That one actually, yeah. Oh God, that was a while ago. Yeah, no, I had a cop pull me over and claimed I ran a red light. And the problem is so by the letter of the law is if you are going the speed limit and you're approaching an intersection and you are committed to the maneuver, in other words, saying it is you as the driver have deemed it unsafe for you to come to a safe stop with all the other drivers around you, taking into condition the weather and everything like this, and you're where the dash lines become solid and you're crossing that stop line and the light turns yellow, you are expected to complete the maneuver. That's what I did in this case. I was making a left-hand turn. I had a green arrow. The arrow turned yellow as my front wheels crossed the stop line, legally allowing me to complete the maneuver. If I was to slam on my brakes, I would have caused a 7-car pileup.
Yeah.
Completed the maneuver, and I got pulled over. Cop goes, "You ran a red light." So no, I didn't. He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "The light turned yellow after I crossed the stop line. That's not running a red light." He goes,
you explained to him you did the safe thing.
I did the safe thing. The law says you're supposed to complete the maneuver. Don't put other people in jeopardy. He went back, checked his law book, came back and offered to give me a warning. I respectfully declined the warning, stating that a warning would still imply I did something wrong. And he agreed. And then we talked about Nationals baseball on the side of the road for 5 minutes, and then he let me go.
So the reason for the law is safety.
Yes.
Keep that in the back of your mind because we're going to talk about that today. I'm going to tell you, you've probably heard this, but a very, very long time ago, when we were in college, I got pulled over by the county police, and it was around midnight. I was coming home from do you remember what time Mass was back then on Sundays?
10 p.m.
10 p.m., right? So I get pulled over around midnight because we finished cleaning up the chapel, and they're like, "Where are you coming from?" And I said, "Church." And they were like, "BS," right?
There's no way.
It's almost midnight. It's almost technically Monday morning by the calendar.
Like, sir, I'm Catholic.
Yeah, I know. Very Catholic. So Catholic, I'm suppressing my sexuality.
I mean,
So So these officers, well, one of them said to me, "You have a gun in the car." Now,
What?
you don't remember this?
I don't remember that part.
Okay, so I don't know what led them to believe that, right? Maybe they were looking for a suspect in a white Toyota Corolla similar to what I had, but I was stunned by this. Like Mr. Goody Two Shoes getting pulled over and an officer telling me that I had a gun. Now, first off, in Virginia, it is legal.
Yes.
I don't think at that time you even needed a concealed carry permit, so it would be legal. So I'm not sure if that's a reason to pull someone over in itself. However, I was so stunned. The officer goes, "Sir, you have a gun in the car," and I said, "Okay." I didn't. I mean,
This is true. If you catch Dan off guard, he does respond with "okay."
Okay,
It is not affirmation. It is not confirmation. It is a reaction.
I've actually been dinged for that in media training at work because sometimes reporters will ask you gotcha questions, and we all have this tendency to be like, "Yeah, don't do that."
Yeah, no.
So they were in their vehicle for a while, at least 15 minutes, came back to me, asked if they could search the car. And again, I said, "Oh, okay." So they go through all the contents and they're stacking it up on the hood of my car. Do you know what they found?
I have to keep it family friendly.
It was family friendly. It was like rainbows and sunshine.
Was it an enormous quantity of rosaries?
Close. So on the hood of my car, they had stacked 3 Bibles, 20 of, if you remember the night prayer, we would do Vespers together.
Yes.
20 night prayers, a soccer ball, and 2 pairs of shoes. And they said, "You can go now."
Now, for you people listening at home, this is a very, very Dan Tilson moment. To this day, I think he still carries like 80% of that in his car.
Oh, jeez. Well, okay. Where were we going with that? Yeah. So the canon law has, over time, become this place where we talk about the external forum. So the church has become really concerned with making sure we're upholding the good character, the representation of the church. Moral theology has become more and more the expert in the conscience. Not psychology here, but the inner conscience, how one understands what it is that God is expecting us to do. Both professions claim or think that they really have a good understanding of the other, and that is so not true. And so I tend to be more this middle ground guy. Remember, we've talked before about, I love that the Germans are actually trying to take the abuse situation in the church seriously and figure out, how do we go forward? They're actually trying to do something about it. The problem is they have no discipline. Here in the US, we love discipline so much that sometimes we forget it's not theology.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a priest I was chatting with, and he was like, "But it does represent theology." And I said, "Yeah, in the background." It's kind of like when you're trying to fall asleep and you turn a podcast on, hopefully this one.
Not while you're sleeping.
No.
I'd hope you listen to this while you're awake.
Okay, well, let's be real. We all have that podcast that just brings us comfort. So, okay, do you know where this breakdown started? I said it's been about 300 years where they've been going on this divorce path for 300 years. Where did it start?
Use the D word. Probably some massive split in the church.
Okay, what was the last major split in the church?
Well, that was Eastern and Western Church, right? That was Eastern Orthodox.
Oh, a little bit after that.
After that, Protestant Reformation.
Yeah, nailing the 95
Yeah,
theses.
Good old Marty Luther.
Excuse you?
Yeah, Marty Short.
Are you on a first name basis with Martin Luther?
I mean, fellow German. I mean,
I bet he had his own TV show too.
Yeah, it's called Nail This with Martin Luther.
So here's where the split between canon lawyers and moral theologians began. Back then we had confession. Confession is a long-standing sacrament in the church, but you may not know this. It was often just a once-a-year thing.
Yeah.
In the 300 years leading up to Martin Luther, it was a once-a-year thing for most people.
A lot of people at home were like, "Why can't we have that today?"
Well, I mean, to be fair, a lot of us treat it that way.
I would argue people maybe go once a year.
So the church decided that we need to lock this down. People are feeling untethered. They're starting to question the faith. We need people to go to confession frequently.
Yeah.
The intention is good. The problem is you now have to train tens of thousands of priests how to hear an overload of confessions.
Mhm.
How do you think they did that?
Poorly.
Well, what kind of resources did they give them?
They made their own theses in the form of a pamphlet and mass produced them for priests.
Oh, honey, it was not a pamphlet.
I'm gonna tell Chris you called me honey.
They're called moral manuals. Okay?
Moral manuals.
Moral manuals. And by the way, the vast majority of the most popular ones were written by Jesuits. So for all of this reputation that Jesuits may have about being, free flowing and just doing whatever, they actually started the problem first. So here we are. Much love to our Jesuits.
We love our Jesuits.
We sure do. So the moral manuals, that's where we start to get the, you go to confession, you say a mortal sin, and the priest is like, well, how many times? And it seems a little weird.
It's that drive-through theology.
Exactly. But it started right after the Protestant Reformation. And it got a little wild in the 1850s. There's a beautiful French name I'm going to say here and not butcher. The Jesuit's name was Jean-Baptiste Saint-Just.
Nailed it.
We think. We'll check the hidden messages later. So he got so in-depth in his moral manual that he created charts classifying sins by the wealth of the person committing the sin,
oh my,
the wealth of the victim, and he accounted for inflation and currency conversion.
So are you telling me the gravity of a sin changes based upon whether you're in the UK using the British pound or in the EU using the euro?
This is exactly what theologians tried to do in the 1800s.
That's great.
And so you can see how this divorce, it starts to widen because a lot of people are, oh man, I wish I could figure out who came up with this. It's a theologian, but he calls it the nuttiness coefficient, right? People have been saying for a really long time that, hey, we got a little off the rails with the moral manuals. Now, it was helpful. It's helpful, but instead of doing the really hard work of forming consciences, we were like, here's your dictionary-sized manual for confession. So honestly, if you look at what's going on in the world especially in the 19th and 20th century, fewer and fewer countries are Catholic, right? Or there's this explosion of religious freedom. In the United States, it was done in a largely okay way. And by okay, I don't mean great. For the Catholic Church's perspective, I love our religious freedom, just for the record. But if you're looking at France, religious freedom was a very violent thing.
Yeah.
Okay. And so there's naturally a lot of skepticism. What else happens? Women can vote. Women can vote starting the new code of canon law for this time was done in 1917. I think that was the same time that we ratified allowing women to vote in the United States. Right. So there's a lot of change happening, and this is the church's way to push back on modernism. So if we go to that canon lawyer we were talking about at the beginning, Father Ginter Dzierzon in Poland, he's really concerned, quite frankly. He says, look, things are getting more and more complicated. And there's this problem, especially in marriages, because we talk a lot about validity, right? When somebody's questioning, like, oh, is my marriage valid? I don't know, because and this is something that plagues a lot of people now, because the way that we have described what is required of you going into a marriage, it sounds very legal. Not to mention, there's no such thing as a valid but non-sacramental marriage. You got two baptized people, the church assumes that you have come in with a quote-unquote minimum cognitive capacity. So it's like when you say I do, the church is like, oh, well, they had all the conditions there. And that's just not always true. So Father Ginter, I guess he doesn't personally raise this question, but I'm looking at what he says and I'm like, do you think it's better, John, for the church to allow a lot of people to try marriage in the church, knowing that a lot of us are going to fail? Or do you think it's more prudent to say, okay, we're a church, we're only going to allow, this number of people per year to have a sacrament of marriage and a church wedding?
So the answer is not as simple as one or the other. because obviously you would want to limit it, right? From the eyes of the church, you'd be like, look, I want to make sure that people who are entering the sacrament actually understand what they're doing. There's marriage classes for a reason. So in the church's eye, to avoid the pain of annulment, you would want to limit it to those that you have deemed, ready for marriage, right? Versus the issue of, if you limit it, you're going to drive people away from your faith, because it's so difficult to take that step that will bring not just happiness to the church, but happiness to these two individual people who want to spend the rest of their life together. So my argument would be the church should allow people to just get their marriage, like without a litmus test, right? Without saying, how Catholic are you? Take this quiz on BuzzFeed kind of thing. Like, not one of those, but just let them do it. And plus, I mean, if you're charging $200 for annulment, that's a great way of raising funds, don't you think?
I know that you take issue with that.
I do.
We'll get into that. Don't worry.
How to take my shot. Sorry.
Listen, for our international listeners, if you are getting married in the United States, in most places there is a 200-question survey. The survey is not as legalistic as it sounds. It asks a lot of good questions. It tries to identify the differences that you may have. Like, are you aligned on how to discipline children? Are you aligned on finances? Are you aligned on when and where we're going to pray? And it's not to say that there's a right or wrong. Actually, it's really funny because when you get the results, sometimes the results, it shows that you're unaligned, and then you compare the two and you're like, wow, both the bride and the groom answered the same way. Why does it flag this? It's because you didn't have the preferred answer at the church.
Yeah.
So, well, okay, John, before we get into annulments, when someone says I do, there are three things that the church says that you need. You need to intend fidelity, okay? You need to intend permanence, and you need to intend openness to life, or I guess we could say, for if theology's sake, open to fruitfulness.
Yes.
Okay. That is how canon lawyers definitely measure it.
Mm-hmm.
Theologians like to spend a lot more time investigating whether or not you are prepared to give the gift of self, which is something that is expected to grow and unfold over time. But it also it's like, hey, is this person prepared to bring the eros, meaning that sexual gift? And are they prepared to bring that agape, meaning love for the sake of God or for the other? I think we should point out here, if you are not capable of bringing the eros to the marriage, then moral theology would say you're not ready. So that actually would preclude someone who's gay but feels like they have to get married to a woman, because that's what the church calls them to.
Mm-hmm.
And in theology, if your eros is not geared towards that, then I don't know, the sacrament might not be valid.
Sounds like a catch-22.
It is. Yeah, I mean, some theologians have called it the moral impossibility, right? Where the rules tell you that you have to do something to be moral, but it's also impossible.
Yeah, it's like the church is telling you, hey, you can't be gay and be married. So you suppress your attraction for the same sex in hopes that you can be married and find some happiness in life. But then now you're also being told that because you have those same sex feelings and you're in a marriage, your marriage is also not valid. You can't win.
I mean, that's precisely why we have theology for the unwanted.
Yeah.
It's because there are a lot of people that feel that they're just never going to satisfy the rules. So theology is still capable of speaking to and with your situation.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what we want to say is Father Ginter points out that canon law treats broken relationships like it's a black and white contract.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, if you're in like one of these destructive marriages, whether it's toxic or abusive, or maybe even, you've gone your separate ways. You get married at age 18? Some people do. Very few, but some people do. They get married at age 18, and then by the time they're 25, they're like, hey, I have now come to understand myself better, and this is just not going well. Well, the guidance the church would give would either lead you to preserve the structure of the marriage or maybe just the appearance, quite frankly,
Mhm.
or it leads you towards an annulment process. Okay. This is going to be your opportunity, John, because I know you have strong feelings about annulments.
Would you call it strong?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, you're right. The whole annulment process is backwards to me, right? So it feels like it's portraying like a courtroom. Dan, it's time for me to ask you a question.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of an annulment?
Well, I guess you would say, first and foremost, every rule is about the salvation of souls. So that's first and foremost. So you're looking at this within the context of the couple that's coming to you. And then for the annulment, you're trying to demonstrate that the conditions for a sacramental marriage that we talked about, those 3 conditions, not that they're not there now, but that they never existed.
Yeah, so it's like it's a form of pastoral care in essence.
Yeah, it's supposed to be.
Yeah. So if we put together this thing of pastoral care, saying, hey, look, this couple's in this situation where they feel like all 3 of these requirements for marriage were not there from the beginning, then we need to go through and figure out, is that true or is it not? So pastoral care now turns into a courtroom, and dioceses are incredibly good at even using legal terminology to make it feel like it's a court case, to make it feel like you're being put before a judge and jury. I mean, they ask you for interviews, they ask for depositions, right? And then on top of it, obviously this marriage is already broken down. Otherwise, they wouldn't be asking for an annulment in the first place. And they're working through all of this. And then on top of it, you're being charged $200 for it.
By the way, I mean, in terms of courtroom issues, $200 is a steal, my friend.
It is, but hopefully you don't have experience with this, with like knowing people who've gone through a divorce and everything. But generally one of the main, issues with civil divorce, money is a big one.
Yes.
So you're in this relationship, now you're splitting up, now you have to pay another $200. Or maybe even worse, maybe you're in an abusive relationship and you're trying to get the church's blessing to get out of here, and you have to pay $200, and now you're stuck in limbo as a church takes months to figure it out. And there's no reason it should take months, right? Like, okay, you say, the canon lawyer needs to go and do interviews. They don't do that. They send you a PDF and an email and say, give this to 7 people who can testify to your marriage and have them email it back to me by Tuesday. That's all they do for $200, and they drag it on for 4 months.
That is okay. So I can sense that you're pulling from a particular experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
not me. I've never been married.
Yeah.
Thanks be to God.
He's open and ready to mingle. No, we're not going to go into whomever the personal example is because, from diocese to diocese, and I'm sure from lawyer to lawyer, it's going to be different. But the objective is the salvation of souls. Did the person feel that in this case that you're thinking of?
No.
Okay. So a marriage is a very serious thing.
Yes.
Right? The church is doing the right thing and trying to uphold or make it, I don't know that it's right to say, make it difficult to get out. But marriage is that sacrament of unity, similar to the Eucharist, except we're talking about 2 people's lives.
Yes.
Okay? And moral theology wants to talk about how did they successfully integrate all of the aspects of their lives, and were they capable of that gift of self?
Yeah.
Okay? Because it mirrors that unity of Christ and his church, and it's a symbol of that unity, divorce in itself is an unsymbol.
Yes.
And so theologically, it's a very difficult thing for the church to do. The problem is that we have widely chosen as a church to say that annulment is the only pastoral option that we're willing to go down right now, instead of thinking creatively.
Yeah.
Now, theologically, lots of good reasons for it, but you and I have talked about this before. I feel like, tell me if you think we ever lead people towards a sort of annulment fiction narrative.
Oh, like convincing yourself that your marriage was like never a thing, so like you want an annulment, or
like we make it very difficult to go to the priest or your pastor and say, hey, the first 10 years of my marriage were lovely. Okay. I wish I could repeat those first 10 years, but life is different now. He or she is different. I'm I'm different and I need to get out for X, Y, Z. I mean, there's all kinds of legitimate reasons why, for safety, for health, whatever, people, unfortunately, tragically, may need to separate, right?
Yeah.
Why is it so difficult for us to go to the priest and say, hey, no. We had all the conditions, right? We had that intention of permanence. We had that openness to fruitfulness. In fact, we had 4 kids, we had that, what is the third? Oh, fidelity. No one cheated in this marriage, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you had all those conditions then, you have them now, but it's not working.
I would say it's the same reason why the person with same-sex attraction is suppressing those feelings and getting into a marriage. It's because they're afraid of the backlash, the negative stigma that comes with bringing that to the church.
I just want to know if you think that people ever convince themselves that, hey, no, actually on my wedding day, I wasn't capable of saying I do because of X, Y, and Z.
I think that we as humans have a very good way of convincing ourselves of an alternate reality in some cases.
Yeah.
I'm not saying everyone does it, but
I think we all do this at least in small ways, right?
in some situations, yes, but in terms of like how big or how much gravity surrounds a situation, I think it really does depend. But I mean, I think even our listeners can sit there right now or whatever you're doing and think of a time, honestly, where you convinced yourself of an alternate reality of what happened. Like, example, Dan, you and I are driving into DC for a baseball game, right? And I'm driving. We all know I'm the more aggressive driver here. I got no problem admitting this. And I'm speeding and I'm trying to get around traffic. I'm trying to avoid all the Maryland license plates on the road. And I'm getting frustrated because it shouldn't be this hard to drive 20 miles to DC, but it is. And we get to DC and we meet up with our friends. And I'm like, I had to speed around so many people. Like, I had to go at least 90 to get around all these people. I had people slamming on their brakes and people switching lanes without their turn signals, just getting in my way and everything. And it was like, oh man, that sounds crazy. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go grab a beer real quick. I'll be right back. I leave and you go, guys, traffic wasn't that bad. Like, he was maybe doing 65 and like one person cut him off. But other than that, like,
John's telling stories again.
Yeah, it's the whole, hey, I went fishing and I caught a barracuda when really it was a tuna fish kind of thing.
So Father Ginter is not in favor of more widespread annulment.
Yeah.
I'm not just saying that. I read through some of his stuff with the help of Google Translate because I don't read in Polish.
Only Italian.
But I think that you can read through his stuff from a vulnerable position or someone who has not felt totally welcome in the church and think, man, he's got the right attitude, but he doesn't have the openness to honestly deal with just how complex our lives are. I'm using his examples because I appreciate that there's a canon lawyer out there who is saying things are not as perfect as they need to be. Okay. So we should give him immense credit for that. But when a marriage dies, we treat it like a crime scene.
It is.
Okay. Your friend or whomever you were thinking of where they were asked for 7 witnesses. I don't know in what tradition 7 witnesses is like the perfect example to prove that conditions never existed X number of years ago. But it's treated like a crime scene. We might as well pull the yellow tape out and, the chalk to mark where the bodies were. So
this is where one of the conditions was not met.
Yeah. And I think, from a perspective of survival, as someone who does theology because I demand to be seen by God, who does see me, it was me that needed the convincing. I think that we often lead ourselves down a sort of fiction, right? Like when I was told the priest hears about my same-sex attraction in confession when I was much younger, and they're like, you, my friend, are called to the priesthood. And whether or not I felt that, some days I did, other days I didn't, but I certainly spent more time making peace with that's what I thought I was supposed to do and what I was supposed to believe, rather than just simply saying, hey, that's not me. I don't feel this way. I don't feel the way the church expects me to feel. Or in the case of a marriage, instead of saying, Father, we did have those 3 necessary conditions to say, I do. But today they're not there. And it's so bad that I have to take a step away. Right. So Father Ginter, his last name is so difficult that we've only said it a couple times in this show. Dzierzon. We'll put the spelling in the podcast notes. Don't you worry. He basically just says like, hey guys, we need to kind of keep revisiting what's the reason for the law? What's the reason that we allow these exceptions, etc. And he wants to see the church with a little bit more authority to make pastoral exceptions, provided that they still uphold the law.
Mm-hmm.
Moral theologians, on the other hand, are more like, how about we just look at what it is and then figure out what the law is after?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can see, though, why we probably need a mix of both systems, right?
Oh, for sure.
Okay, let's go back to traffic.
Beep, beep.
Ever been to Montana?
By the grace of God, no.
Okay, stop. It's beautiful.
Sure.
It is beautiful.
Yeah.
However, for our international listeners, it's just a really far drive from wherever you are.
And flat.
It is.
With nothing around.
Okay, Buffalo. Not the city of Buffalo, but the animal.
Buffalo, bison, just anything that's not a human and not in a car.
Okay, so do you know what they called their speed limit on the highways before 1999?
Oh, what was it like? Reasonable and prudent.
Yes.
Yeah.
I always thought it was safe and reasonable, but you're right. It was reasonable and prudent. I think by comparing the traffic laws in Montana and then right here, you can see exactly this tension you have between like canon law and moral theology. So in Montana, they didn't have a set speed limit.
Correct.
Right? Okay. So it required the driver to to take a look around you. Are there people around? No, probably not. So, okay,
it's
drive.
Montana. There's never people.
Keep driving. What's the weather? Right? Is there low visibility? Slow down. Is there no visibility? Get off the road, right? It can be a scenario where it's blizzarding, so safe and reasonable or reasonable and prudent is 0 miles per hour. Don't drive. Okay. But the law was tethered to the situations that were around you. Correct. It required this personal responsibility. It required, in theology, we would call it a discernment, and it would require conscience. Okay. What risk am I willing to take getting on the road and going the speed versus how bad do I need to get there?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's think about where we are in Virginia.
Good old Commonwealth.
Down the road by the shopping center, what's the speedway? Sorry, what's the speed limit?
45.
45. Always or just today or?
Until they change the sign.
Until they change the sign, right. So when it's raining, what's the speed limit?
It's technically still 45.
Okay, when you have a mob of children going to Chick-fil-A, what's the speed limit?
55. No, 45.
Oh, jeez. So in Virginia, there's actually formulas somewhere. I assume it's with our Department of Transportation and our state capital, but it's based off of density and how wide the road is. It's not based off of the conditions for that moment and for who you are and how many people are around you. Okay. I think in Montana, where it's a much smaller population, that system did make sense. Now, it allowed for a lot of subjectivity and serious potential for abuse, quite frankly, both on the part of the driver and the officers.
Yeah.
But in Virginia, everything is very predictable, and we like predictable.
Virginia's predictable?
Virginia's predictable. Not when it comes to elections. But you can kind of see, like, the Montana model is more like moral theology, right? Yeah. We want to do the best thing for this moment, in this place, in this time. And that's actually, quite frankly, what natural law is.
Yeah.
Right? Natural law is not a speed limit sign. I think I use this example in my book. It's like if you're going around a curve, you're going to slow down, not because there's a sign that says so, but because you know it's dangerous if you don't. Okay, so that's kind of following the natural law.
Yeah.
In Virginia, we're okay with more complexity. We like the black and white more than the gray. We want things to be clear. Okay, so we've got that. Now, the question is, has canon law become a little bit too much like Virginia traffic laws?
I mean, we talked about it a little bit last episode about all these guardrails that are up to ensure, the fish swim upstream the correct way. right? Like there's all these guardrails in place to ensure that you don't stray too far. So, I mean, in some cases, I feel like, the Catholic Church does have a lot of rules in place. And in all honesty, that's part of the reason why I found the Catholic faith so attractive, was because it was more structured. It did have more guardrails. Like I needed, in my faith life, I discovered during my discernment that I needed more structure. So that's something the Catholic Church could provide me. And that's something that attracted me a little bit more to the church.
I'm probably a product of this exact time and place in my environment, but I'm more of that middle ground guy where I don't find the Virginia model or the Montana model very satisfying. I think we need a little bit of a middle ground. And we're actually in the middle of that time right now, because before Vatican II, actually, quite frankly, before 1984, when John Paul II rewrote the Code of Canon Law, it was hyper fixated on things. So let's look at the 1917 Code of Canon Law. We had gotten to the point, John, where we were actually trying to take customs, like literally just, if you think about going to a birthday party where there's a piñata, and now you're trying to legislate that there must be a piñata at the birthday party, right? Like that's how into the law, into the weeds that we got. So Code of Canon Law 1917 and Section 1262. It is desirable, consistent with ancient discipline, women be separated from men in church. And you're like, wait a minute. This isn't, all laws are supposed to be about salvation.
Yeah.
Right. I am sure of that time, the year that women were allowed to start voting, that they were like, we need them to sit separate. But now you look at that and you're like, wait, we just took a cultural thing and then wrote it into law.
Yeah.
Okay. Another one, 1258. It is not lawful for the faithful in any way to assist actively or to take part in the religious services of non-Catholics. Okay, this sounded fine at first, right? There's more and more religious freedom. And so you're like, hey, your people need to go to your Catholic church. And you don't want them going over, to First Baptist down the street and asking weird questions, right? But we live in America. Lots of us, hopefully all of us, have Protestant friends, right? Hopefully we're not just like so siloed.
Yeah.
This became a problem because people were like, they had to start going to their priest and being like, Father, Bob died. Can I go to Bob's funeral? What do you think the priest said?
No. Or the priest probably went, is Bob Catholic?
Fair, right? Why is Bob not coming to me for a funeral? No.
Right.
So I think realistically, it was probably pretty mixed. There probably were quite a few places that were like, do not go to the funeral. Do not go. In more likelihood, because the law said you can't actively assist, it meant that a lot of Catholics were going to the funeral and not singing the hymns. They felt that, okay, God is calling me to go to Bob's funeral and pray for him, but I'm not going to pray with the people around me.
Even though the Catholic Church and Protestant churches shared a lot of hymns, even back in 1917.
You said that to me once upon a time. I didn't believe you. And I was like, okay, how great thou art. Hark the herald angels sing. Can you believe?
All the Christmas songs.
Yeah. The deviance I had in mind to sing Hark the herald angel sings with Bob's family.
Look, I'm just saying, well, first off, if you're singing that at a funeral, that's
right. Yeah.
Poor Bobby died around Christmas time.
Yeah.
But, the funny thing is like we joke about it, but honestly, I've had conversations with my mom, when she was growing up in the 1960s, she had friends that were Catholic. She grew up Protestant. There was a big divide within her own friend group on what they could and couldn't do because of church-related activities, because she wasn't Catholic and her friend was. So even though this was a 1917 thing, this was an attitude that got carried on for a very long time.
Make no mistake. God wants us to encounter one another. Bob was created in the image and likeness of God.
Just chose the wrong Protestant.
No, but we are called to go out and be with one another and to try and close ourselves off from things that we're afraid to question or things that will cause us doubt. There's no basis for that within Catholic theology. Now, I understand why there's basis for that within the name of, creating unity.
Yeah.
Especially when there's so many options here, you want those strong boundaries. I'm more of a middle ground guy. I think we need that balance between the disciplines that make sure that you and I are on the way. We're on that journey to being able to give that gift of self and to do it in a deeper way over time. But that we do not have to wall ourselves off. So I want to bring up another theologian, Father Basilio Petra. We've looked at him before and a few other issues, especially on sexuality and marriage. However, his expertise is on the Eastern Orthodox churches. And I didn't realize this until I read some of his articles. Did you know that just like Catholics, they do not, like we stand up for the sanctity of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
We do not endorse marriages falling apart. We do not endorse second marriages. That's not even a thing if you're Catholic, right?
Yeah.
But did you know that in the Eastern Orthodox tradition, that you can get that second marriage? Now, not to say it's easy, but like, did you know that there's such thing as a second church ceremony?
I didn't know that was an option. No.
Yeah. So it's under the principle of oikonomia, which is the same Greek root for economy. They thought of it as like management of the household, right? And what I thought was so refreshingly honest. Not that I agree, and I definitely don't think that Catholics need to go down this route. But they have the creativity and the honesty to be able to say, yeah, the conditions for the marriage were there and they're not there today. And they're not there today, but they're also definitely not going back that way because of abuse or trauma or addiction or whatever. Or maybe, we allowed an 18-year-old to get married and now they're 35 and they're like, I finally understand myself and I made a mistake.
Yeah.
People make mistakes, John.
What?
People make mistakes and theology never wants you to be stuck. Last week we talked about what?
Freedom.
Freedom is not about preserving from error. Do you remember what it is?
Freedom.
Liberty, guys.
It's liberty.
Freedom is all about, from the theologian's perspective, it's all about breaking that cycle of decline.
Yeah.
Right. So that applies to the cross.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about Jesus Christ on the crucifix, breaking that cycle of decline within humanity, he did that for us. Okay. Within marriages too, sometimes there's a decline, and breaking that cycle of decline, that using your freedom, can either mean going to therapy. Hopefully it does. It can mean changing your own mindset. Hopefully not with any sort of tolerance of violence against yourself. I want to make that clear. And it can also mean being honest and recognizing that, hey, this is not where I'm supposed to be. Neither of us are supposed to be there. Okay. So in the Catholic Church, your options are turn it into a crime scene, where it then goes through the annulment process, which, depending on where you are, may or may not feel pastoral.
Very messy.
Look, divorces are tragic and they are messy.
Absolutely.
That's how it goes. But the other option is to just kind of stick it out. Or, sorry, there's one more option. Separate, but not tell anyone in your church. And we create this scenario where within the sacrament of unity, which is the Eucharist, we have people who are trying to hide the fact that they're suffering. We have people who are trying to hide the fact that their marriage has fallen apart because they don't want to be judged.
Yep.
We allow one another to feel judged because the law specifies the expectations for the community. And John, you and I in some way have failed them. And so what do? We stuff it down.
Yep.
We stuff it down. In the Eastern Orthodox tradition, our brothers and sisters over there just kind of have this radical honesty. They're like, look, people make mistakes. People do bad things. Okay. So what is the next best scenario? Now, what I thought was so fascinating was when they allow, with their bishop's permission, you can't just like allow everyone to get this second marriage. They are not dissolving the first marriage. This is actually where it crosses like a huge red line for Catholicism. My understanding of their theology is that they are saying the next best scenario is you can find unity within this new relationship, and the church wants to bless what is good where it exists.
Kind of sounds familiar.
Sounds like Belgium, right?
Kind of sounds like Belgium.
Yeah. I mean, look, we're not so different. The The main difference, I'd have to say, is whether or not our local church is grappling with all of the dishonesty that exists.
Yeah, I think it's also, I mentioned it towards the end of last week's episode, is the Eastern Orthodox Church, by recognizing things can get messy, things can fall apart, they're still walking with their people. They're still walking with those in the faith that still want to be a part of their faith, even though they know things have gotten messy. Things aren't, 100% kosher. Like they're not, it's just not a gold star anymore, right?
Yeah.
They recognize things have changed, and the church says, like, look, we're not going to ignore your first marriage. We understand there's this connection with you and this other person. We're going to walk with you. And I think that's the beauty of Christianity in general, is the ultimate message, besides, God is love, is you take a look at Jesus' ministry on earth. He was walking with the rejects, the sinners of his time, right? The people that society outcast. He was walking with them regardless of what was going on. And that's the beauty of Christianity. And that's honestly where I feel like a lot of us have failed. Those of us that sit in the pews have failed.
The last thing I'll say on the Eastern Orthodox is that, interestingly enough, that second church wedding ceremony, it's not a joyful one like the first one. It actually takes on a penitential tone. So it almost feels like Lent.
Oh, no.
And this is kind of beautiful. I'm not sure how I would feel if I were in this situation, but they actually have prayers inserted where you pray for forgiveness of the other, right?
I kind of like that, though.
I do kind of like it. I don't know how I'd feel in practice. Especially like you're trying to start your life over fresh, and you're like, we have to acknowledge the past. But I mean, Christ does that with us, right? And Christ shows this courageous path of being able to walk with us. You don't have to deny what was, but you're marching towards something together. I mean, that's what the Emmaus walk was.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm thinking about it, like, that moment in Mass where you have that public declaration to everyone, where you say that I have failed, I have sinned to you, my brothers and sisters.
Right.
That's a public in my mind. Like, hearing that part of like the unhappy ceremony in the Eastern Orthodox Church, when you pray for the other person and their sins, like, to me, that's what pops into my mind, is like, we already do something kind of like that every Mass, where we admit to our fellow worshipers there that are with us, whoever is there, we are publicly admitting that we have fallen short of what's expected of us as Catholics, as Christians. And we ask for you to pray for me and me to pray for you in that very same moment. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
That's the attitude everyone in church needs to have, is that we recognize we all fall short, and we're all there to support one another in our journey of faith at the end of the day. Like, that's the beauty of it. That's the end goal. We just need to do a better job at making that essentially blanketed across everything. We are here for one another.
For our podcast listeners, I guess I would say, John and I are not campaigning or asking the church to revisit laws. Like, there's just no world where our voice would matter there. Where I think our voice matters is where we're talking with you all, because we read your messages, we take them to heart. And for so many of you to write in and say, oh, I love being Catholic, but there's this one tiny part of my life that I must keep hidden.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I will feel judged. That is precisely the area where we need to seek freedom.
Yeah.
Look, there are people who are called to a celibate life in the Catholic Church. And I think if done by grace and it's chosen, it is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
There are others who are in a crumbling marriage and they think they've met someone special. And so they're walking slow and they're trying to find, what is it that I can do to grow in a relationship with Christ in this moment, even though the rules don't really allow for this. I think you have to look at, as Father Ginter would say, the reason for the law. Now, he wouldn't agree with someone breaking the law, but he would say, look at the reason of the law.
Mm-hmm.
that's also what moral theologians would do. And I'll pull up this last part from, again, Father Basilio Petra with the tracheotomy analogy. Kind of gross. But, he says that in the Eastern Orthodox with the oikonomia, they're looking at the management of the household, right? If you imagine someone suffocating because their throat is crushed and they're in the emergency room, a doctor isn't going to waste time debating the universal law of breathe through your nose, breathe through your mouth. This is the way nature intended it. The doctor performs a tracheotomy. It's not ideal. This happened to my grandfather in the hospital. It's not ideal because it's not reversible. And it's a little uncomfortable, but you can save the life.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's acknowledging that there's a wound, that things were not perfect before, but okay, we have the freedom to go forward, to grow in the love of Christ, and to walk that path of mercy. That's going to look a little bit different for everyone. I guess what I would say is I want to encourage everyone to figure out what is it in your life that you need more freedom to say, to speak, to make sure that you're not holding those in the pews at arm's length because you're afraid of being judged. If you're not ready to share stories with those around you, Sean and I are always happy to read and listen and pray with you and respond as often as we can. So you can find us at theologyfortheunwanted.com. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at theounwanted. So until next time, know that we're trying to walk this journey with you and we're proud of you.